Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we're going to be going over Amumu support and how to play it and what makes this character kind of one of the great engagers of the time currently playing this game. So, without further ado, let's just jump into it and kind of explain some of the strengths and weaknesses of this character and also when to identify good times for us to pick.
Warning, warning, warning.
So, without further ado, what is Amumu support and why does it work so well? Well, the reason why it is such a potent and powerful character is because now the Q bandage toss has 2 stacks of it. And because of this, it makes your level 1 incredibly potent. And one of the main complaints when playing a lot of tank supports, think of Alistar and Leona for example, or maybe even Thresh or Blitzcrank to a lesser extent, is you usually need a level or 2 to have all those spells. I call them comboing spells together. The Zenith Blade and the Stun, the Headbutt and the Pulverize, etc. And this is also what makes a champion like Nautilus really prevalent, is because of the fact of his anchor being able to all-in level 1 and have pressure. Well, Amumu does this even better than Nautilus, so a lot of times this character is actually the premier all-in champion for the early stages of laning phase. Super snowbally and quite powerful. Since you have 2 activations of the bandage toss, you can go in, create some pressure, potentially kite backwards, or you can even use them subsequently to lock your opponents down for long periods of time and just chase them across the lane. You do tons and tons of damage on them between your auto attacks and your Q, and you have lots and lots of lockdown. So I'm a really big fan of this character whenever the enemy team just seems to have a lot of obnoxious lane champions. So a lot of people will always ask, hey, like, when should I be picking this character? Let's first talk about really strong lane partners. So Amumu really wants characters that can play aggressively in the early stages. Level 1 is obviously ideal, but even if it maybe takes a couple of levels to add up, it's not bad in the later stages. So what you want are characters that can either dash or play really aggressively. Obviously, the number 1 character that comes in for the lane partners for this character is going to be Callista, because she can play incredibly aggressively and she's equipped with a dash also, so she can follow you very easily and she loves to fight level 1. But there are a couple of other characters that are actually pretty great with this champion too. Anything that can either throw spells off of it or play really aggressively in the early stages are really desirable. So another one that's kind of popped into the current meta is Draven. Draven really loves to play aggressively. Obviously, he's a little bit better at chasing at level 2 rather than level 1, but because you do have 2 bandage tosses and you most commonly are going to be taking Glacial, which we'll go over a little later, you have lots of lockdown for snowballing in the laning phase. Other light examples of this are maybe Lucian in the later stages of lane, once he gets 2 or 3 levels and he can start dashing in and following you up. But these are usually the premier characters that I love playing Amumu support with. But also, I love playing Amumu support when they just have really obnoxious poking champions. Playing against that really lame Zyra Ashe lane that's just going to poke you down, or maybe they're picking Ashe support or Senna or something like that, where they're very squishy, but they're very obnoxious level 1. Picking that Amumu with potentially a character that can follow up really, really well allows you to lock down those kills. Now, even though I listed some of the better characters, you can still play her, still play Amumu with most of the premium AD carries like Zeri and Sivir. Just make sure that, their teammate is in range, or you're not going too far away from them since they don't have nearly the same equipped levels of mobility to catch up to them in the early stages. So those are kind of the outlines for what I'm looking for when I'm picking Amumu, or maybe I have a lane partner that wants me to play a melee champion, and I'm not as crazy about playing some of the other tanks since they get poked out a little bit in the early stages. I want to be able to play pedal to the metal even at level 1. Another thing that makes this character great that kind of, pushes everything together is just because of the fact that his ultimate is AoE. Curse of the Sad Mummy, the ultimate is, an AoE CC that lasts for a long period of time. And this just allows you to chain crowd control together in team fights very, very well. You can either isolate targets and just CC them by bandage tossing, ulting, and then bandage tossing. Or you can just have big team fight wombos where a lot of enemy players are either diving into you that are melee characters, or you get really good angles where you can jump on those important carries and CC them down. This character is also exceptionally stronger the lower elo you play a lot of times, because AD carries are less likely to take cleanse in those matchups. And once cleanse is not on the table, you can just have a field day of crowd controlling. So if you really want to play, a new melee support that goes in, gets a lot of stuff done, and maybe Nautilus is banned pretty frequently, or you're not as big a fan of him, Amumu is going to be the choice for you. Hey guys, if you're deciding that, maybe you want to pick up one of those Star Guardian skins, don't forget to use my creator code right here, and you can help support the stream and the content that's coming out. Appreciate it a lot, guys. So next, let's cover our rune setups and itemization. So you're pretty much going to take Glacial every time. I've taken Aftershock on this character a handful of times, and I just didn't feel like I was any tankier. But really, we want to be kind of building on the blocks of what this character is really great at, which is CC and fighting at level 1. So we're going to always be taking Glacial. After that, you can opt into the stopwatch, but I tend to watch a lot of fights and team fights in general, and there's so much fighting that a lot of times you don't get as much good value out of the stopwatch as you think. So I'm a bigger fan of Hextech Flash. After that, Minion Dematerializer is really great for last hitting those cannons. Maybe your AD carry is taking your last hits, or it's a bit hard for you to get in range. You can opt into the Biscuits, but I think it's a little bit weaker nowadays since Sustain has been kind of hit pretty hard. And I would much rather just have the Minion Dematerializer so I can get all those cannons. And this also means that you can blow out a wave really easily, kill the cannon minion instantly, and then get your resets off, which I think is a bit more important. After that, most people will be taking Cosmic Insight because, as I already stated, and I'm going to be showing you some techniques a little bit later, Flash is paramount for this character to function. So because of this, we want to make sure that our Flash is up as frequently as possible. So on top of Hextech Flash, we're going to have our Flash coming off cooldown as much as possible. You can take Approach Velocity for the level 1 cheese, but that rune obviously falls off pretty fast for you since you'll have so much crowd control that most people won't get away from you anyway, and it's not really necessary to get the bonus movement speed. After that, your secondary is probably just going to be the Resolve Tree with Conditioning and Overgrowth. This just helps you with being a little bit tankier so you don't die instantly in team fights and you can get all your spells off. I've seen other rune setups before, but I think that this is just pretty much the premium. You can opt into Bone Plate in your second win, but I think these runes have been significantly nerfed, so unless you're getting great value in your laning phase, playing super aggressively or something like that, I'm not a fan of it since Bone Plating gets popped off very easily from poke, and second win's numbers nowadays seem a bit underwhelming. So let's jump into our itemization. Pretty much for this character, it's going to be pretty streamlined. You have kind of two options for your main item, but after that, we're pretty much doing the same thing most of the games. So what you can do first off is get Lucidity Boots. We want to make sure that, as I said before, we want to have our CDR put in as much as possible. We want to have our Flash up as frequently as possible, and it also helps with your Bandage Toss in your ultimate too, since most of your other build paths, they have some CDR, but you're not building as much as you'd like. And plus, this just gives you an early spike since it's relatively inexpensive. Also, as I stated before, with the Aftershock, I tend to not find my character that tanky, even when I'm building pretty dang tanky on the character, just because you're behind in levels a lot of times. So you really rely on your ability to get good engages and CC off to actually buy you a bunch of HP. After that, your mythic item, I see a lot of people go Even Shroud, and some people have maybe presented the argument like, oh, okay, well, you're not tanky anyway, so Even Shroud seems to be the premium thing to go because you're CCing people and doing damage. The numbers on this item are so terrible that I just don't recommend taking it pretty much ever. Every time that I've ever seen people build it, it does between like 300-400 damage in like a 15-20 minute time of having the item, so I'm not a fan of it. So pretty much always going to be going Locket. Now the option you have actually besides Locket though is going first item Zonias. And if you don't end up building Zonias first, I usually recommend building it second pretty frequently just because, like I said before, this character isn't actually tanky, but Stasis, immunity to all damage, will actually give you tanky stats. Plus, also, it just goes pretty paired well with your character where you can, go in, CC everyone, oh, my CC ends, then you can Zonias, this buys you enough time to potentially have your teammates follow up, and then you can start pulling back, maybe hit another Bandage Toss or two. Plus, the stats are really efficient on it, since AP is never a bad stat to have on the character, because extra damage for your engage is pretty valuable. So if you feel like there's just so much, there's so many ways for you to die in team fights, you can go Zonias first. If you want to be a bit more helpful with your team or you don't really care as much about your KDA, then Locket is really good because you can Locket your teammates that are going to be following up and going into it. The Locket's more for them than it really is for you. Obviously, it does make you tankier, but it's not going to do that much in that sense. After that, once you get those two items, you're kind of just looking at utility support items. So Knight's Vow is really great if they're diving your AD carry or maybe your mid laner is like an Azir or something like that. You can opt into this. This item is really great since they buffed the ability haste on it basically for free. If you don't feel like you need any of that, or you feel like there's someone shredding you up in the back line, maybe there's a Zeri or a Sivir just throwing spells at you all the time, or you want to lock down a melee-oriented character and you want to have that max tenacity, and Anathema's Chains is also completely fine for you to do. Maybe there's a Silas with Merc Treads and you want to make sure that he's not killing your teammate or a Tryndamere or something like that. Then you can build it, put it on him, and then that allows you to break through a lot of his tenacity since tenacity breaks all of your spells since you have stuns. Outside of that, you have a couple of options for like more supportive items, which are just like redemption. So if you maybe don't need the Zonias, then you could definitely see a scenario where like you go Locket Redemption. This gives you tons of shielding and healing on your whole team. So especially if like you have a lot of melee characters that are stacking up in this sense, this could be really, really great. And then maybe the Knight's Vow after that. But I'd usually recommend that you have Zonias between your first two items, since that will make you a lot harder to kill. Unless, like I said before, you're either really sharp at getting good engages, or you just don't care about dying in team fights, and it's totally fine. Which is also an acceptable way to look at things. So before we jump into laning phase, I want to show off a couple of good techniques and abilities that you can use on the Amumu before we go into anything. Some really important how-tos on playing Amumu are going to be a couple of different combinations you can do with your flash. So, if you didn't already know, on Amumu, what we can actually do is start casting our Q and actually flash in the middle of it, allowing us to get on top of them a lot faster and give our opponents a lot less reaction time for our plays. This is a really great tool for engaging if they're really far away from you and not quite in melee range of using your ultimate. Another thing in tandem of that is also you can press R and then flash. This extends the range a little bit and also allows you to get those quick flash engages off, as you can see right here. From just pressing the R, the animation is going through, and then flashing afterwards. So these are really great tools that I want you to always remember when using this character, especially when your flash is up, since you'll probably be going Lucidity Boots and maybe even taking the CDR rune for your summoners. Now that we've got that figured out, let's jump into our laning phase stuff. So most of our laning phase stuff is going to be really aggressive. Since you have two bandage tosses, we want to be playing aggressive at level 1, potentially looking for bandage tosses at any angle. So oftentimes you want to make sure you're getting yourself in that brush really quickly and wrapping around those minions, looking for those bandage tosses whenever you can. If you hit a bandage toss, don't be afraid to use your ignite pretty dang early. If you can get their flashes or summoners and stuff like that, it's definitely an advantageous scenario. Plus, you also want to be putting enough pressure on them that if you hit the second bandage toss and they're too greedy with their summoners, then a lot of times they'll actually just die while also using their summoners. So play really aggro level 1, since this is really the most important part of the laning phase for your character. Another tip I can also give you is ping on your way. That way your AD carry knows that you want to play aggressively, so you can potentially look for the all-ins rather than just bandage tossing twice and going, where the heck's my AD carry, man? Why didn't anyone follow up on that? Outside of that, don't be afraid to trade your flashes really, really early. It's one of the benefits of Hextech Flash. And also make sure that you're actually starting Sweeper level 1. You can do the technique that a lot of pro players do where they walk to the lane, put the ward in the middle brush, and then recall and switch to Sweeper. This is really great on this character, since if you're actually playing aggressively and trading out your flashes, then you should be able to Hextech Flash pretty frequently from brushes. Mostly what you want to do is wait for the wave to run into each other. That way there's no minions that accidentally fly through your path while you're looking for Hextech Flashes, so that your bandage toss doesn't get blocked. Outside of that, playing aggressively, don't be afraid to move around the map. This character is really great at roaming, and even though your level 6 is really great, don't feel too tied to your laning phase. Make sure that you can constantly go mid, put wards down, potentially even look for ganks for that. Like I said before, trading flashes is advantageous for this character. Plus, if you looked at the techniques right, we can also just Q and flash onto people, and sometimes that's just enough to end up killing them. Because remember, you have 2 bandage tosses, so if you flash Q or Q on someone, force their flash, it's only 2 or 3 seconds before you can throw another Q2. So you can usually chase down people's flashes if they're kind of sitting in the middle of the lane. Outside of that, team fights. So usually you want to be kind of the person that starts team fights, but one of the really important things to notice is your bandage toss takes you really dang far. So make sure that your teammates are nearby before you're actually bandage tossing. You can even use a bandage toss kind of to just peel in the front and chill in the front and wait for enemy players to start moving forward to reinforce fights. So make sure that you're not too trigger happy when it comes to your spells. Having just one Q up is usually enough most of the time. So a lot of times the way I like to do fights is if my teammates aren't in position, oh, there's a melee character here, start hitting each other, back and forth. You can bandage toss them a little bit, and then that will usually cause the enemy players, especially like the AD carrier, the mid laner, to start pulling in, trying to follow up on this fight. This is usually your best opportunity to then use your second bandage toss or your flash if you're paying attention to the video, and getting on top of them very, very easily. Remember, you don't need to get a 5-man ulti every fight. It's totally fine to just get 2 or 3 important players, or just chain it together where you hit a good bandage toss on someone that's isolated, and then you ulti, and then you bandage toss again. That is usually sufficient in most cases. And this is where your Zhonya's comes into play really, really well is if you do go into a super deep fight, making sure that you get your ulti off and then Zhonya's in afterwards so your teammates can follow up is really, really great. A lot of times you'll actually probably have a third bandage toss if you're not dying and you're kind of chaining together spells really well. So just make sure you're paying attention to the cooldown, because even if you are kiting out, we want to make sure you're close enough that, oh, bandage toss comes back in, boom, you can go in and CC again. Since the CC lasts really, really long, and you'll be taking Glacial in most cases too, so you'll have tons of extra lockdown for enemy team fights. But just make sure that you're not overreaching. I've seen a lot of times when people play this character, they tend to just bandage toss in on the first thing they see, ulti, and look up and go, hey, where's my whole team? But remember, that bandage toss takes you far. So make sure that your teammates are a lot closer together, or at least you're doing a lot of damage to people and pulling back afterwards so that you can get out of that fight or just constantly bandage toss whoever is in front. Anyway, guys, hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment in the section below, and hit that bell and whistle, and let me know in the comments maybe what characters you'd like to see guides for in the future. Thanks, guys. See you later.